Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Today we're going to see what happens now that the Duke and Duchess of York return from their long journey from Australia. It sounded like a whirlwind time, all incredible to be involved with and very tiring because of all the places they had to go and the people that they had to see and speak to. They represented their country well, and now they were going back home to their country and, more importantly, to their baby. They reached Portsmouth on June 27, 1927. The king was giving instructions on how to dress. He told the Duke he should wear a frock and coat and epaulets with star, and he said that they shouldn't embrace at the station before so many people, and that when you kiss Mama, take your hat off. Queen Mary was busy in her way at 145 Piccadilly, where the king and the Duchess and their daughter were living. She and Lady Strathmore had been furnishing the princess's nursery and had a cupboard provided for the baby and her toys. The Princess and Alla moved into the house just before her parents got back, and Queen Mary suggested to Lady Strathmore that they should both go to the house with some flowers to put in the rooms and to put a few finishing touches to make the rooms look homey. The trip had them traveling 30,000 miles by sea and several thousand miles by land around the world. At Portsmouth they were greeted by the Duke's three brothers, and together they boarded a special train to Victoria Station on a platform decked with flowers, and they met their families again. Cecilia Strathmore requested 10 platform tickets. Despite what the king said, the families all embraced warmly. The Yorks drove in an open carriage through the cheering crowds down Whitehall and up the Mall to the palace. They were greeted again by their parents privately, and to be reunited with their daughter most importantly. The whole family, including Princess Elizabeth, appeared on the palace balcony. The crowds were ecstatic, and the newspapers were generous in their praise. They commented on the Duchess's sense of duty in leaving her baby behind for so long, and they all made note of her joy in seeing her child again. The Times recorded that twice the Duchess, her face radiant with smiles, brought the princess forward. The voyage was important to both the Duke and Duchess because of the millions of people to Britain, and to the crown it was impressive and moving, and it gave the Duke and Duchess a feeling of the strength of the empire. The trip gave the Duke a new confidence in his ability to confront the world with his wife by his side. And then the Duchess, it gave her knowledge that wherever she went she was able to use her personality to win the affection for herself and, more importantly, for her husband and her country. The experience and lessons were not forgotten. When the Duchess got back from her long voyage, she felt a conflict of emotions. She was reunited with her daughter after a long separation, and it was harder to be separated because of Princess Elizabeth's young age. The king was perceptive and wrote to the Duke right after they returned, "I trust your sweet little baby begins to know her parents now and likes them." And she did, and the Duchess was happy about that. The Duchess wrote to Nanny B, "Her daughter was too delicious, and it was nice to me at once," which was a great relief. The downside was now that they were back to Duke and Duchess, they had lost the intimate intensity they shared throughout the voyage. The tour was tough and tiring, but it was their own tour, and they were away from parental supervision, and everything they did was new, exciting, and shared. Back in London, they had to play the supporting role for the king. He was kind, but often critical and irritable. The most important thing was that the York success had impressed the king and queen. This gave the Duke a new confidence in his own abilities, and his stammer improved. The Duke talked to his voice coach, Lionel Logue, and told him, "I have been talking a lot with the king, and I have no trouble at all. Also, I can make him listen, and I don't have to repeat everything over again." The king was very happy to have the Duke back with him, and he said, "Delighted to have Bertie with me," he wrote to Queen Mary from Balmoral. "He came yesterday evening, had several talks with him, and find him most sensible. Very different to he meant David. The king didn't have trust in David, and he wasn't prepared for him to have access to confidential information. Prince David was charismatic and popular, but he seemed to the king and to many of his own staff to be increasingly careless of the duties of his office. Some felt that the admiration of the cafe society lifestyle had changed him." Throughout the late 20s and 30s, the fears grew. The Duke of York was getting more noticed, and he had acquired a new sense of purpose. He was eager to learn more about the Commonwealth affairs. The Duchess seemed to be the person that everyone in the family confided in, especially her brothers-in-law. Her letters from Prince of Wales were full of affection, gossip, and sometimes included mischievous comments on his parents and his duties. Prince George thought of her as an ally, and knowing that she got along well with his father, sometimes asked her to intervene with him on his behalf. The public demands were growing for the Duchess. She was the focus of attention more than the Duke. That summer began a biography of her, the first of many biographies to be written about the future Queen. Next, the Duke and Duchess spent a pleasant summer relaxing in Scotland with the now 18-month-old Princess Elizabeth. She was walking, and her mother found that a bit nerve-wracking at first. So the third week of September, she and the Duke left their daughter at Balmoral to go 2 days of public engagements in Glasgow. The Duchess, she visited Ralston Hospital for paralyzed ex-servicemen and the Elder Park Child Welfare Center at Govan in the pouring rain. She was made Guild Sister of the Trades Guildry of Glasgow, and she opened the Health Housing exhibition in Kelvin Hall. The Girls' Guildry provided a guard of honor, and she was given the freedom of the city in the presentation speech. She was praised for her interest in the movements for social and educational advancement. Later, she sent a personal donation towards the fund being raised to establish a Scottish Academy of Music in Glasgow. The Duchess wrote the Queen that she enjoyed the whole visit, even though it rained and was rushed as usual. She told the Queen that she missed the baby horribly, but I'm so glad that you're enjoying her. The King sent congratulations on the success of the visit and added, "Your sweet baby is very flourishing and more delightful than ever, and walks about everywhere." They went back to London at the end of the summer, knowing that they had work and winter to look forward to. They had a home in central London now, so they wouldn't feel isolated, and they enjoyed being there. The King also reminded them that Queen Mary had taken a lot of trouble to prepare it for them. In early November, they went to Woolwich and visited the arsenal before the Duke opened the Woolwich Memorial Hospital. November 16th, the Duke and Duchess went together to Exeter to open a new orthopedic hospital. Christmas time, it was time to go to Sandringham as the tradition called for, and Princess Elizabeth was getting more press attention, and this made the Yorks an ideal young family. It was reported that she wore a pink velvet and fur on the journey and white silk for the Christmas party at Sandringham for the estate workers. The princess, according to Queen Mary, said the baby was too sweet and threw crackers and joined in the fun. After Christmas, the princess spent time with Queen Mary and the King as they had requested, and Princess Elizabeth showed her love of the dogs at an early age, and she was playing with the King's dog Snip. When she returned home in late January 1928, the King wrote to the Duke, "I miss your sweet baby more than I can say. Breakfast and tea are quite different without her. I think the air here agrees with her, and she has come on a lot." On 1928, near the end of the year, there was a crisis for the family and the country. November 11th, the Duke and Duchess went with the King and Queen at the Armistice Day ceremony in Cenotaph, and the King caught a chill, and by November 21st, he wasn't feeling well. He wrote in his diary that, "I was taken ill this evening, feverish cold they called it, and retired to bed." There were no more diary entries except a few written by the Queen for the next 5 months. The King almost died because at that time there wasn't penicillin. He had an infection of the chest, and he began to suffer serious bronchial pain and became delirious. And there was also a decline in the strength of the heart. The King's children were summoned, and the Prince David, that is, didn't react well. He wanted to ignore the telegram, saying, "I don't believe a word of it." He was in Kenya on safari. His private secretary told him, "Sir, the King of England is dying, and if that means nothing to you, it means a great deal to us." The prince looked at him, didn't say anything, and left the room to spend the rest of the evening getting to bed with the wife of a local British official. He told a friend it was the best thing to do after a shock. Once he became convinced of what was happening to his father and the fact that he might soon become king himself, he made his way home as fast as possible, by land and by sea. In London there were rumors that the king had died, but the news was being delayed until the return of the Prince of Wales. Others said that the Duke of York was going to take over the throne while his elder brother was away, but I thought that was funny because the Duke never wanted to be king. It also made the Duke laugh, and he wrote his brother that there was a theory that the reason for him rushing home was the event of anything happening to Papa, that I'm going to bag the throne in your absence, just like the Middle Ages. When the Prince of Wales arrived home December 11th, the King's condition was critical. The Duke of York met his brother at Victoria Station and warned him that he would be shocked by his father's changed appearance. The doctor felt that he would have to perform an operation very soon. The Duke said that their mother was calm and strong, and he was worried about her. She keeps too much locked up inside of her. I fear a breakdown if anything awful happens. She's been wonderful. The next day, the end seemed near as the king's gifted nurse, Sister Black, wrote that doctors had done everything that could be done. Human skill ended there. Dawson, the king's doctor, decided to make one more attempt to locate the source of the fatal poison, an abscess just behind the diaphragm. He managed to find the site, plunged in a needle, and drew off a pint of pus. That night the king had a rib removed and the draining of the abscess was completed. The public was informed of the medical bulletins, and churches all over England were kept open day and night so that the people could offer prayers for their monarch. Gradually it seemed that the prayers were being heard. The decline had stopped for the king. He was so frail it was a few weeks before the doctors were confident he would recover. The royal family stayed in London over Christmas. Queen Mary wrote in her diary that for the first time in nearly 6 weeks, the king had been able to hold a conversation with her. That made her happy. There was relief and gratitude throughout the country. May 31st, the new member of Labour, Margaret Bonfield, was the first ever female member of the cabinet. She recalled when my turn came, he broke customary silence to say, "I'm pleased to be the one to whom has come the opportunity to receive the first woman Privy Councillor." His smile as he spoke was cordial and sincere. On July the 7th, the king participated in a service of thanksgiving for his recovery. He had an open wound in his back at the time, and a week later he had a second operation. Another rib was removed and the abscess was successfully drained. The king and queen weren't able to make their summer trip to Balmoral that year. By the end of September, though, his wound finally healed. This time of long recovery put a limelight on the king's children. Most of all, it was the Duke and Duchess of York who came into the prominence that year. Those who knew the Prince of Wales said he was charming and popular, but he had a lack of seriousness. Many years later, Queen Elizabeth revealed that at this time the king himself had doubts that his eldest son would ever succeed him, and told her and her husband so. She remembered they were staying with the king during his convalescence, and he said to the Duke of York, "You'll see, your brother will never become king." Elizabeth said her father-in-law was extraordinary. He had such wisdom. He was a practical man, and she said he must have seen something we didn't, because I remember we thought how ridiculous, because then everybody thought that David was going to be a wonderful king. I remember that very, very well. I remember we both looked at each other and thought, nonsense. February 7th, 1930, Elizabeth's brother Jock died of pneumonia at the age of 43. He was the fourth child that Lady Strathmore had lost, and she was upset. She said he was so loving, so interesting, and interested in everything, and this world would be much poorer without him. The Duchess was distressed too. She said it was a terrible thing to happen, and even now I can hardly believe it's true. The Duchess wrote to Darcy Osborne. She observed that although Jock could be sarcastic and a little difficult to please, he was intensely affectionate and a really good friend. If I needed good advice, I always asked Jock, because though it might not be as palatable as one could wish, it was always right. She felt that none of her brothers should live in town. They all loved the countryside too much. Queen Mary was sympathetic. She said, "Your poor mother, my heart aches for her, knowing her love for all her children, and what a devoted family you are, a rare occurrence in these days." So I'm going to end the video here. In the next episode, we're going to find out that Elizabeth is pregnant again and will be giving birth to Princess Margaret. In this episode, we have the Duke and the Duchess returning home to the excitement of their families and the public as well. The Duke and Duchess were worried that baby Elizabeth wouldn't remember them, but she was as happy as everyone else to have them back. The Duke and Duchess started to be in the spotlight even more after their trip, and so was Princess Elizabeth. They were a young royal family, and everybody wanted to follow their every move. Next came the near death of the king. We saw how the prince seemed to care more about himself than his father, not wanting to return home, but finally his secretary convinced him that his father might be dying. The king was tough and had to endure some rib removals to help save his life. When the king recovered, he had doubts that Prince David would be king. The future queen mother remembered when the king told her and her husband that. They didn't believe it. They thought he would be a good king, but she said he must have seen something that we didn't. So as we know, he didn't make a good king, and his father knew him better than anyone else, it seems. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video, And if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. I wish everybody a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.